Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Economic Development Districts Leading the Way on Pandemic Economic Recovery. I'm Brett Schwartz, an Associate Director at the NATO Research Foundation, and head up our Stronger SEDS, Stronger Regions program funded by the Economic Development Administration. Thanks so much for joining us for today's session, which is the final webinar in a spring series we've hosted on SEDS, recovery, and resilience. Since the beginning of the pandemic, economic development districts emerged as key players in supporting economic and recovery in the regions they serve. And today we'll hear from EDD and EDA staff from around the country who will share how their organizations have been working on economic recovery. During our roundtable discussion, you'll learn how districts are assisting their communities and regions in a variety of ways, including through resilience planning, administering revolving loan funds, connecting local businesses with resources and information, and launching creative initiatives to support with long-term recovery and diversification. You know, EDDs were on the scene from the earliest days of the pandemic, providing immediate support and assistance, and will be there through the duration of the recovery, utilizing their expertise, services, and partnerships to guide regions during this unprecedented time. So I'm really excited for our conversation today, but before we jump into that, I want to share a few quick remarks and webinar logistics. So we have a lot of new attendees on the webinar today, so just as a brief background, I'm with the NATO Research Foundation, which is the nonprofit research and training arm of the National Association of Development Organizations, or NATO. And NATO is a membership association of regional development organizations and the National Network of Economic Development Districts from across the country, primarily those serving small metropolitan and rural regions. Now we're in the 5th year of our Stronger SEDS, Stronger Regions program, which is generously funded through a grant from U.S. EDA. And through this program, we've organized trainings and conferences, delivered webinars like today's, created case studies and videos, and developed other resources to train regional staff on all things related to the SEDS process and document. So all the materials that we've developed through this program over the past 5 years are online and for free at our companion website, sedscentral.com. There you'll find recordings like today's, presentation slides, case studies on videos on all things related to the SEDS, including a SEDS 101 section for those of you who are new to the process. So this website is updated nearly monthly, so take a look and check out the new resources and information that's posted. It's just a few quick webinar logistics. Again, many thanks for joining us today. We've got a really large crowd, which is exciting to see. If you do have any questions or comments, please share them through the questions box. That's on the right side of the screen in the drop-down menu. We'll try to get to as many of those at the end of the session. Number one question I always get is about, are we recording? And absolutely we are. So we're recording today's webinar. It'll be posted later today up on our website at nato.org, as well as at SEDS Central. You'll also receive an email tomorrow with a link to the webinar recording. All 4 of the recordings from the webinar series we hosted this spring are also available online. You'll get the link to that tomorrow too. We had sessions on best practices in doing the SEDS, rural entrepreneurship strategies, supporting local and small businesses, and of course today's session on economic development districts. So I hope you can take a look at those if you missed them throughout the spring. And of course, as always, please reach out to me at any time if you have any questions about the NATO Research Foundation, the work that we're doing with the Stronger SEDS, Stronger Regions program. Really love to hear what you're working on, how we can support your good work, especially now when things continue to ramp up with the services you provide. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got a really large group of folks on the webinar today, which is really inspiring and exciting to see. We really want to kind of get a snapshot of where you all are, particularly with how you've been spending your EDA CARES Act funding to support with economic recovery. As you know, there was a mix of competitive and non-competitive funds that was available to districts throughout the past year, and that money was spent and is being spent in a variety of ways. So let's launch this quick poll and just kind of gauge where everyone is. So we'll take a look here. Great, so you should see up on the screen here asking the question, in what ways did your organization deploy EDA CARES Act funding to support with economic recovery, and check all that applies. So we've got 5 options here. We know many of you are doing a lot more than just these 5. We were kind of limited to 5 choices through this poll, but we have enhancing the SEDS under running a resilience plan, hiring a disaster recovery coordinator, hiring other additional program or project staff, utilizing a revolving loan fund, and supporting local businesses with other assistance and coaching. So feel free to check as many that you're working on. If there's some other interesting or innovative things that you're doing, drop that into the chat box as well. I'd love to hear what you're working on. So we'll leave this open for about 5 more seconds. Great, and we'll close in 3, 2, 1. And let's take a look. All right, great. So what do we have here? We've got, obviously you're all keeping busy. That is not a surprise. So it looks like the biggest with almost 2/3, we have enhancing the SEDS and running a resilience plan. Behind that, disaster recovery coordinators at 40%, other additional staff, and supporting businesses around half as well. So just kind of soak that all in here. All that to say, you're all extremely busy deploying these funds in a lot of really interesting and unique ways. We'll hear about some of that on the call as well. But again, feel free to drop into the chat box other ways that you are utilizing these funds. We know very shortly there'll be new opportunities to support your work in a variety of ways through the new federal resources. So, so thanks again for sharing this right now. So with that, we're going to hide the poll. All right, perfect. All right, so at this time, I'd like to ask our panel to join me up here on the virtual stage, if they could turn on their webcams. And I'm really thrilled to be joined by a great group of folks today. And I'll briefly introduce them and really want to kind of get into our conversation. We're joined by Matthew Dolge, who is the Executive Director of the Piedmont Triad Regional Council, based in Kernersville, North Carolina. This organization serves 12 counties in and around Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and the High Point metro area. So Matthew, thanks for being here.
It's great to be with you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. Also joined by Cheryl Gonzalez, who is the Executive Director of the Western Nevada Development District, based in Carson City. This organization serves 7 counties, including the greater Reno and Lake Tahoe region. So Cheryl, it's always great to see you.
Thank you.
Great. Also joined today by Angela Martinez, who is the Regional Director of EDA's Denver Regional Office. The Denver office serves a 10-state region, which consists of Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Montana, North Dakota, Nebraska, South Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming. And Angie, I'm sure you can rattle those off faster than I can. But thanks for being here. Really looking forward to your perspective.
Thanks, Brett. Good afternoon.
Yeah, and finally, we have Heather Smokiarina, who is the Executive Director of the Kisatchie Delta Regional Planning and Development District, based in Alexandria, Louisiana, which serves 8 parishes in the north central part of the state. I think I've got my geography right, Heather. So thanks so much again for being here.
Thank you.
Great. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, the format for today's webinar is really a roundtable discussion. I've prepared 5 questions in advance that the group will address, and we'll try to get to some of those questions that you may have towards the end. So make sure to type those in as they come to you. So let's jump right into our conversation today. And the first question being, you know, all of you are working on so many different projects and initiatives, really multi-pronged approach to recovery, but we'd really love to kind of hear about one key project or initiative from the past year that's really best positioning your region for recovery from the pandemic. So I know it's hard to probably choose one with so many things happening in your regions, but I think it'd be a great way to kind of start our conversation today. So we'll kick things off with Matthew, and then we'll go to Cheryl, and then Heather, and then we'll hear from Angie from that kind of larger regional perspective. So Matthew, feel free to kick us off.
Great, thank you. I'll go pretty quick because I know we want to hear from everybody. I picked out our small business support program that we put into place. Obviously with our SEDS, I think as all you folks have, resilient communities is a huge part of that, and a key component for us is vibrant downtowns. And so when we started to look at closings and capacity limits, we knew the types of businesses that are going to be the most impacted were those keys to our small town redevelopment. That's small local businesses, restaurants, brew pubs. Those folks have less online traffic, and so we knew we needed to reach out and help those folks so we wouldn't have those closings and those key blank spots in our downtowns when we started to come out of the pandemic. We took full advantage of the $2 million offered by EDA for our Revolving Loan Fund, and put 1.5 million of that into microloans, which we'd never done before, quite frankly, because we didn't have the administrative support to do that in the past. We branded our Lights on Loan program and put an ad campaign together with billboards and worked with partners in downtown business associations and chambers to get folks online. We streamlined a very simple application process online. Our platform is Neighborly that we use, but we made it very simple. Folks could go on, roll through that entire process online. Our terms were 5 years, no interest, with 4-year repayment. So obviously giving folks a break the first year during the pandemic to start paying that after that. I guess we were fully funded in June by EDA, and we've been fully expended with those funds since March. Made 33 micro loans, saved about 250 jobs in small businesses in our downtowns across the region, which at $6,000 a job is a pretty good investment if you start looking at what you would pay for those new jobs if you were being asked to do incentives. And so I think that was our first step, was really bringing capital to those folks who needed it most. We were more flexible than the PPP loans, which were really for staffing, and this could be used for rent, could be used for overhead in various ways. Again, we've seen great success with that. The second component to it was to make sure that those businesses that were open but with reduced capacity could, one, protect their employees and have a safe environment, and make the public feel confident that they could come into those businesses and do business safely. So we started what we called the Workplace Restart program as a part of our business assistance. We worked with a national training group called 180 Skills, and they've developed an online platform for us for employers and employees to do training on how to handle the pandemic, how to create that safe workspace, how to keep your employees safe, how to deal with customers, et cetera. And for those who went through that, for us, as a little bonus, a carrot in that process, we had a local research group that developed masks that were washable and reusable, a local company that started producing those, a textile manufacturer. And so we gave the employers who went through the program 2 masks per employee. We sent those to them for free, or had them pick them up at a drop-off for us. And so we also gave them signage that said they were a best practice employer and they were a safe workplace. They could put outside, they could put on doors so that the public could see they were engaged in safe practices inside. And we had about 200 businesses go through that, about 9,000 employees who were engaged in that training. So those 2 pieces for us, we think, really set us up to weather the storm for those key businesses for us, and hopefully allow them to come out of the pandemic into a good transition of success.
Great. Wow. Really appreciate it, Matthew. And I noticed that you dropped in a link to that initiative into the chat box. So I encourage folks to check that out as well. And we'll also make sure to link to any of these resources and projects that are discussed today along with the webinar. Yeah,
those are 2 landing pages. One is for the loan program and one is for the training program.
Perfect. Thanks, Matthew. Great. So we'll go across country, jump over to Cheryl in Nevada.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. And I guess some of you is good afternoon. Western Nevada Development District received funding to create an economic recovery and resiliency plan. And for us, it was really important to create a planning process that would engage various sectors that are important to economic recovery, and to invest those partners in the process so that when the plan was completed, they would be engaged and collaborate towards implementing programs and services that had come out of that process. And so the biggest initiative that's coming out of that process is that we're going to have 4 action teams that will represent the 12 goal areas that were identified through this process. And several of the partners that participated in this, we had a little over 130 unique organizations that worked under different sectors and identifying the issues, creating solutions to address those issues and what they wanted in terms of desired outcomes. In that process, it really, in their determination of solutions, it invested them to begin to think about ways that they can begin to engage the activities that would address those issues and create the desired outcomes. So we're at the point in time with our plan that we're just finalizing the draft, which, by the way, our plan is going to get embedded into our comprehensive economic development strategy. And we identified that, every year when you update your SEDS, you look at your goals. Well, the goals that came out of the Economic Recovery and Resiliency Plan are now the SEDS goals. And all the actions and work will reflect that effort as we move forward in the next year to 5 years with that action plan. So we are at the point where we've drafted the plan, and we are now putting together those 4 action teams. Many individuals that participated in the ERR process have already identified that they would like to participate as team leaders in these different actions. And the other important initiative that has also come out of that is the interface with our state, our Governor's Office of Economic Development, that have also looped into that effort. And we have begun to interface our actions with the state's Recovery and Resiliency Plan. So we'll have more robust outcomes and programs and services that will come out of this process. Again, that interface with what the state is doing. So to me, that is the biggest key. It's a 30,000-foot level project or initiative that will cascade down into very specific activities and programs that will respond to the economic shock, and will also definitely underscore the importance of economic resiliency. So we're really looking forward to that. And I think, just as a sidebar, one of the most important projects that are going to come out of that, because of our interface with the state, is an economic emergency response team that will participate with the state emergency teams that responded in terms of public safety issues. And now we're looking at creating an arm of that team that will be an economic emergency response team. So that effort's going to begin, actually this effort will begin the end of this month with the development of what that group looks like.
Great, thanks for sharing, Cheryl. I know you completed your kind of SEDS rewrite shortly before the pandemic, so it's been great to kind of see how you've been able to kind of use that momentum now and build with the resilience plan. So thanks again. All right, so we're going to head over to Louisiana, Heather. So I'd love to hear what you're working on. And Heather, you're still on mute.
I would love to say that it's just one project. It's really one approach that we focused on, because otherwise, we would be civil because there was just too much. I can fully appreciate Cheryl and Matthew, what they've said, and kind of wish that I'd have had their cell phone numbers to text back and forth with them when it started, because I would love to incorporate some of those ideas as well. Like, we had maybe a few things that were similar, but a significant difference is that you can either call it, condolences or compliments. But before the pandemic occurred, while I was not in attendance at a statewide meeting, my counterparts decided that I was going to head up the Louisiana Association of Planning and Development Districts. And, that's not a surprise. Us economic development district.
Heather, I'll just tell you, never miss a meeting. That's a good rule of thumb. Never miss.
My dad had died, and I was literally like writing the eulogy and on the way to the funeral. It is not fair. But honestly, we treat each other like a family. And, not gonna lie, sometimes there's those brotherly, sisterly fights, but from a resilience standpoint, it's also one of those things where we always come back together. And our district, I guess we feel that so maybe intimately in how we function is because we are very much at the center of the state, and we touch nearly every other district. So there's going to just inherently with how we function as an economic development district have that coordination, if you will. So in this role, one of the things that we did very, very well and concentrated on is our planning districts coming together, and with the support of our EDR and our region, we did more in the line of, say, virtual work sessions with the districts for helping to prepare applicants, particularly statewide applicants or state agency applicants, with understanding who EDA is and what EDA does and what their planning and development districts do and what a SEDS is and why we have it. And there wasn't just one project that came out of that, but there was one significant maybe evolution of a process that I think is significant and literally will change lives throughout Louisiana. So it's not just, and partially as well with the Delta Regional Authority, is that we have a very, very close relationship with our Delta Regional Authority Governor's Office designee, Leslie Durham. And we consider she, our EDR, and our university centers part of kind of our LAPDD family. So when we had our work sessions by, video conference, mostly teleconference, because none of us really like Zoom, but we would work concertedly together on looking at projects or improving projects. And we started last May looking at, on a collective basis, how we could tackle the broadband mapping issue through the broadband initiative targeting strategy, where a couple of us were asked to write on it. We circulated it. It went before the Resilient Louisiana Commissions because our governor's office designee is also the head of the Bell Commission, so Broadband for Everyone in Louisiana. And we also pursued an EDA grant application together as the planning districts as a co-applicant with our State Department of Transportation and Development and our governor's office representative, if you will, the Bell Commission, Broadband for Everyone in Louisiana. And we're looking at how we would crowdsource information throughout the entire state, how we will enrich that process with additional mapping and insight, create a data sharing program between the districts and the State Department of Transportation and Development that has an online portal, and that we will also be looking at any other future layers that we will add into that, even custom layers. So that way, wherever districts are, where they start, we will be considerate of that process, because districts are in different places where broadband is concerned, but we're going to have kind of that core deliverable that we're all working on as a co-applicant. So with the state association being that co-applicant, it just kind of brings together, marries and simplifies the administration and predominantly the performance in a consistent manner for our entire state. So this is like our soapbox and everything. This is why we don't sleep at night. And it's not because we're worried about it. It's because we know we need it, because it's touched every business, every school, every emergency function. And we had those fun little, few extra hurricanes and ice storms with folks on top of pandemic. And if, for those of you who don't know, our region, along with the New Orleans region, were for very many months, especially last summer, the highest per capita in the nation of, even beyond New York, of COVID transmission. And 22 to 24% of our workforce is healthcare and social assistance sector, which is 11 to 12 times more likely to transmit. So it changes that perspective when you can't be in the room with folks and you have to learn how to be collaborative, how to be respectful, and how to be aggressive time-wise, because the problem's here, the problem's now. And, several of the other districts, I'd like to call them by name, but I would take too much time, have said very important and very real practical things, which is if it was a problem before the disasters, it was a problem before COVID, it didn't go away, it's still a problem. And so how we treat it now, it is so important that we are about all 8 and representing all 8, and all 8 being together, maybe not identical, but representing and respecting that we're either all on the same page or we are respecting that we have some differences, but we are concerted in our efforts to be not just collaborative, but as a group, our family, if you will. And what that has done, or best positioning our region, is not just best positioning our region, but our organizations, is we have literally gone back to multiple state agencies, and different ones of us assisted them with understanding and even fueling and helping to write or edit their investment requests from EDA under CARES Act, and even advising them and pointing out to them when we just weren't going to write a letter, because we do an area-wide review. We don't do a support letter. If you get a support letter, it's because you earned it. And because I will say anything to anybody, by happenstance, it's probably a good thing that I wasn't at that meeting. But it's also by just purely so much resilience that we already have to integrate in who we are and what we do. I think it makes us maybe a little bit different, is because we do have those disasters that keep happening so frequently, and in such a even international eye, that the value that we are getting the most is the all eight, and the all eight with the different state agencies, and better representing their connection to EDA and the RSF process, because it definitely permeates. And so while I'd love to say that's our only project that's important, so many of these projects and investments are going to dovetail into one another. And this is probably the most significant to literally changing the course of our futures for our businesses, our communities, et cetera. And so we represent within ourselves, within our work programs, with our history, our family tie with EDA as well. And literally have used this as an education process and a more than superficial relationship with several of the state agencies that, we really see kind of a change in approach, that instead of it being, oh yeah, we'll call the planning districts, it's more of a, did you call your planning district? We need to talk to them. And that may be the most significant change for our future, because it really sets up capacity building in a completely different way. Sorry for the soapbox, but it literally, I believe, I've been doing this almost 25 years, and I believe that it is probably the most significant, say, investment, if you will, or pivotal moment for our districts.
That's great, Heather. Thanks so much for that. This idea of partnerships, and particularly at the state level, both amongst the districts and also engaging with state economic development and other offices. This has been a really amazing opportunity this past year to enhance those relationships and partnerships. So it's really great to hear how you're doing it, especially related to broadband, which we know is so critical. We do have some folks drop in the chat box that broadband planning was one of their, kind of key focuses, how they deployed their funding as well. I also know the state of Nebraska is doing some really great statewide work with the development districts. So thanks so much for that. Partnerships, so crucial. With that, we'll jump over to Angie to talk about kind of a big picture perspective, what she's seeing in the Denver regional office.
Thank you, Brett. And the examples provided by my fellow panelists, I think really represent some of the great innovative thinking that we're seeing across in our region in particular, but across the country. And just to sort of recap, I mean, it was a year ago that EDA launched our CARES Act investments. As you guys all know and have articulated, quite a large portion of that funding went directly to our partners, our districts, our tribal partners, our Revolving Loan Fund partners, which I know many of you operate RLFs as well, and university centers. And even just 2 months ago, we announced that we had hit the $1 billion mark. So I think we're really effectively moving those dollars, getting them into communities so they can really help with the recovery. And also it helps prepare us for the next round, which I know is on everyone's mind, the American Rescue Plan. So stay tuned on that. I don't have any big announcements today, unfortunately, but that should be coming quite soon. But regarding the work that all of you guys are doing, it is remarkable. I think we're seeing in our region, in particular in the Denver region, a lot of just amping up some of the traditional work that our districts do, as well as a lot of new innovative ideas. And one example that I was prepared to share, Heather, is also around broadband. And Brett, you mentioned what our friends in Nebraska are doing around broadband. And I think, the discussion of the relevance of districts in recovery is really key. And the association in Nebraska came together, and they're all working together to map broadband speeds around the state. And I'm sure in many of your states, my fellow panelists, as well as the states of our participants, you do see a huge divide in access to broadband and ability to transition. When the pandemic hit, many of us, most of us started working from home. All of us are in our homes, it looks like right now. And there was a big disparity between urban areas and rural areas. And our friends in Nebraska have collaborated. They've partnered with a geospatial engineering firm to really collaborate with residents and businesses and local elected officials to map the speeds of broadband across the state and be able to provide that data and recommendations back to the state. And I just think that's a great example, similar, Heather, to what you guys are doing in Louisiana to show how impactful the districts can be, particularly when they're collaborating and working together.
Great, Angie, thanks so much. I had no idea you were going to mention that Nebraska model. It's really wonderful. They've got a website as well, which I can certainly link to if you want to check that out. But again, another great example of the State Association of Districts pooling their resources to address a real critical issue. So thanks for that. So we're going to jump to our next question, which kind of dovetail, what we've just been discussing here. And over this past year, districts have been able to engage with kind of traditional stakeholders that they've worked with for many years, but also as a result of the pandemic, have worked with kind of new partners and maybe new agencies and new funders. So just a question for all of you here about how you've really been able to kind of demonstrate the value of your EDD to the general public through this work. Districts tend to be behind the scenes, kind of out of the limelight, but doing the work that makes things happen. But what ways have you been able to really kind of show the value of the districts with initial response, but also recovery as well? So we'll go in the same order again and toss over to Matthew.
Yeah, I'll be pretty brief on this. One thing I would say is I have an engagement specialist, whether you call it a public relations person, public information officer, whomever. If you don't have one, you need one. My engagement specialist did a great job. Again, we had a professional ad campaign for our loan program. We worked closely with nonprofits, with businesses, and we received, whether it's through our social media campaigns or unpaid advertising with stories on television, radio, et cetera. We got a lot of mileage out of a lot of our programs. We distributed over 200,000 masks to nonprofits and folks like farmers markets and farms to help them stay engaged, to change their processes. Basically, if something happened, we decided we were going to be there to come up with a solution for folks. But you've got to have somebody there who can make that case for you and make sure that the word is getting out. And our engagement specialist did just an incredible job for us. And I think, honestly, we have been that behind the scenes group, and we've been happy with that in the past. Our members, our local governments, get a lot of credit for work that we do frankly for them and with them. But this was a different time, and it served us well to be able to step out and tell that story.
Great. Thanks. Cheryl?
Yeah, we did a similar operation in terms of community outreach. We wanted folks to know that there was an economic recovery and council plan engaged and soliciting input. We had an economic recovery council. And so we provided, as a part of that outreach, we provided a monthly update, if you will, newsletter that talked about the work that was being completed by our ERR council members. We had 14 teams, and each of those teams were represented with, again, various organizations and agencies that were subject matter experts within those different economic sectors, if you will. So, for example, we had a health and wellness team, we had education and workforce team, an infrastructure transportation team. We had an agricultural team, so we had a business team. So 14 teams that were headed up by a council rep. And that council rep worked with us to identify, again, subject matter experts that would weigh in and inform the plan. And we felt it was really important to communicate that out to all of our members as well as our stakeholders. And through that effort, I think we really created a lot more knowledge and understanding of who we are as a district, what our mission is, how we support economic vitality, recovery, and resiliency, and what the outcomes were going to be generated as a result of that plan. And I'm not sure if Brett, you received that update when we push it out once a month, but it provides a lot of good statistical information on our economic impact, the negative impacts, as well as how we are recovering. And so to me, I know that through this process as well with the ERR Council, some of those folks had never even heard of Western Nevada Development District. We're the only district in the state of Nevada. We've been around for 38 years, and a lot of people had never even heard of us. They confused us with the regional development authorities, how we're different, and what do you do really? And so a lot of those people that participated in our process as either a council rep or on a team, you know, they were not aware of us. Now they are. They're very invested. They value what our mission is about, and they also see an important role that they play in the economic recovery and resiliency process. It also hooked us up with a lot of the state departments. Again, we started meeting on a regular basis with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, as well as UNR Center for Economics. So we had a lot of engagement, which was furthered with our community outreach, which again informed folks, created understanding and appreciation for what we do. Our board, when the CARES Act was first, before it was released, we had 7 counties and 5 cities, and I think we had 5 associate members. Now we have 8 counties, 6 cities, and we probably are up to 20 associate members on our board that are all participating in this next step of engaging the plan. So the community outreach was invaluable.
Great, thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, I do appreciate those updates that come through, and they're very accessible and readable with infographics and design. So thanks for including me. We'll jump over now to Heather.
I feel like I should be taking notes this whole time. Y'all are just
do this, right?
so incredibly good. Well, I can't talk and take notes. I don't do so well, so maybe I shouldn't talk so much. I guess we do it in different ways whenever you're talking about the value to the public. What so often happens is, as you've both shared, and all of you actually, is that it's more about the organizations or the leadership, whether it be informal or elected, that more have an identity, if you will. And we are a very small staff. We, for a number of years, were basically 2.5 people. And so with the CARES Act, we already had a little bit of recovery assistance that we had added, a couple of temporary part-time positions that we were able to continue, so we could continue some of those efforts as well, and kind of adapt, if you will. So that's been beneficial, but instead of focusing on necessarily our identity, it was more about good information and no misinformation. So it's like right as everything's shut down, because, you know, we went from operating continuously. We had just had Mardi Gras a couple weeks before, and it really started touching. It was March 12th, it was announced that state was shutting down. March 15th, you had to be out of your offices, and we kind of hung around for another week or two. I sent a couple of folks home because of considerations for their own health and their family's health. But we didn't have a case yet in our parish, and it didn't take long. And we had to go, okay, well, what do we do? Because at this point, we didn't have all of the equipment for everybody to work remotely and that kind of thing. And we had to make some decisions about who could go in and who could not, which means I'm still pretty much at home because of those circumstances. But we were kind of like individual little agents of social media, is pretty much our interaction with the public, if you will. Not as much like just our membership, but our membership would even utilize those things. And I think that was probably the highest value because let's be honest, we don't want to walk away from the fact that this was heavily politicized by some folks, and that there's also, you know, individual choice about whether people choose to vaccinate or not vaccinate, and it can be a very contentious subject about what happened with the shutdowns. How does that affect businesses? How does that affect workers? Are we going to get workers back? And you know, that's a complicated discussion to have. Instead of focusing on the discussion, we focused our efforts on let's provide good information and access to credible information, and let's do it in multiple, because Facebook is really like the most common. It's often duplicated over to one of the other social media platforms, is to make sure we have good information. And probably the most rewarding moment kind of from those initial components when we could kind of start to sneak out to a couple of places is there was a restaurant downtown, and my husband and I had snuck out to have lunch, and literally the tables were like 20 feet away from each other, and you mask up to go in, but we wanted to support small business even in our actions. And we snuck in, and one of the local professionals that we had given direct technical assistance to on the PPP program literally like announced across the restaurant with like the whole arms raised and everything. It was like, we got it. So, and it was so unusual because so many of our banks were just so overwhelmed that there were literally folks that had no other institution. They were overwhelmed, couldn't take anybody else. So it's not that we reached everyone in the public, but we were able to help provide better information or access to credible information, credible sources, and help continue those conversations supported with fact, if you will. So it kind of took some of the conflict out of the room and contributed to, let's just look at what we're dealing with and make our decisions from there. And like I tell folks, we don't make local decisions. We are regional, we are advisory, we are glad to be, you know, that subject matter expertise. It's like we're experts in being general practitioners, if you will, along a lot of different topics, but to help them navigate the process and to help individuals navigate the information and help point out where to get credible information it was just really valuable to the process, because it was continuing to change day by day. And we would keep links of that up on our website for how to get to it. And we would repost. So there was a lot of attention very early individually and kind of borrowing from our existing networks on a personal level, you know, literally blurring the lines between personal and business and representing how to make good decisions and not one perspective or another, but being safe and being active and being supportive of our economic community, our leadership discussions, and how challenging that could be. So the general public may still not know who Kisatchie Delta is, but it's kind of weird. Even this week, I had somebody call me and I was like, and they were like, we're from Southwest Louisiana and we need to set up a call with you. And I'm like, but we're on the phone now. You know, and, what do you need? Well, how can I help you? Did you call your planning district? Oh yeah, we already talked to him. So it's very interesting that at least in development circles, it's changing, but I think our role has been one more of supportive to help either directly get information out or get information out to folks who are getting the information out. So we're working through that way because we really are not the size to be all things to all people. But I think we played a valuable role.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Heather. We'll turn to Angie now. And I just want to maybe tweak the question a little bit about, the regional offices have just been so critical over this past year in support of the districts. And so, of course, demonstrating value with the EDDs, but also, Angie, how the regional offices are kind of sharing information and best practices with each other, over this past year, and just kind of the value of what's happening at that level. So anything you can share with us kind of how the regional directors are communicating and again, demonstrating the value from each of your regions.
Hey, Brett, thank you for that question. Can you repeat it one time? My network just cut out a little bit, so I didn't quite hear.
I probably wasn't super clear either, but yeah, love for you to respond to this question, but also, the regional offices have been really crucial this past year, obviously with administering the funding and providing support to the districts. And I know all the regional directors have very strong relationships with each other. So love to hear about kind of how you're communicating with other regional offices about the value of what's kind of happening and how kind of what you're learning in Denver could, support folks in the Atlanta region and out in Seattle, just kind of how that network is happening kind of at your federal level.
Sure. Well, I do think that, one of the great outcomes from the CARES Act funding and the support that we were able to give to the districts is allowing you to do even more to demonstrate your value to your communities, to your board members, and to the general public. We have several examples and we are running out of time, so I certainly don't have time to share all of them. But, one in particular, I think with the CARES Act and the upcoming rescue plan, more money from states, philanthropy, looking to help with recovery, there are a lot of resources of funding out there. And, in Iowa, Simcoe is doing a grants writing 101 for their member communities to really help prepare them to be able to go after that funding. And I think that's, great value to those members to be able to better compete and understand what federal agencies are looking for in their funding opportunities. Another example is in Kansas, where one of our districts partnered with one of our EDA-funded university centers to support the more than 500 manufacturers in the area to really give them some business support and expertise at no cost to them. And I think that's a great example. And then certainly the Revolving Loan Fund has, I think, been really huge and very relevant, especially early on. Some of the things that we're seeing, I think, that are quite relevant to the states are investments in child care centers. And we've all heard, how women are disproportionately affected by the pandemic, and allowing folks to get back into the workforce and be able to have a place for their kids to go is really important. So we've seen a lot of investments in that. We've also seen quite a lot of investments in employee ownership. I think that's particularly important and helpful in rural communities where, a community may have only one of a particular kind of business, and having that opportunity for the employees who know the business to be able to take it over and keep that business there is really important. And then as far as within EDA, communication is the key. And, since the CARES Act passed, we have met, we started out as a management team meeting daily. Now we meet twice a week. I bet with the rescue plan passage, we're going to start meeting more frequently again, but we really do communicate. We know it's important to have a similar approach across our regions. And we definitely just communicate with each other and use each other and their expertise to brainstorm and help address issues. So I think it's helped us to be effective and be equitable as well.
Great, perfect. Thanks so much for that insight. So we're running a little bit behind, but that's not a bad thing. I think we're covering a lot of really good ground here and covering a lot of the really incredible work that you're doing. So I want to combine maybe the next two questions here as we kind of run through. And the next one being about kind of biggest challenge that you've experienced over the past year. I'm sure there's a handful that you could talk about, but just a challenge and how you were able to overcome it. And then also combine that with the following question about a major lesson that you've learned from this past year, and how that experience will really inform kind of how your organization kind of operates moving forward. The history books will soon explain this experience for all of us and kind of look back and reflect, but would love to hear, kind of your kind of initial kind of thoughts here again about kind of a challenge, how you've overcome it, and maybe how you could be doing business a little bit differently moving forward from your experience and what you've learned from the past year. So we'll go with that around the table again and kick off with Matthew.
Great. I'll go pretty quickly. I'd say for us, obviously, when you have to send staff home, and I am a larger region, so I have 12 counties and 75 members. Luckily, I've got a great technology staff, and we could send everybody home and everybody could work remotely immediately, it was huge for us. But not being able to have in-person contact with groups or individuals is incredibly impactful. And so, it really causes us to have to put into a plan, to be very intentional about contacts with folks. Like one of the first things we did is I started having weekly managers calls with all the city and county managers in our region. And, the governor's office was on those calls, the treasurer's office was on those calls, Health and Human Services. Once, the vaccine starts, we had federal partners. But we brought those folks to the table on a weekly basis that could make sure everybody was on the same page. And, what's the governor doing now? What closings do we have? And what do parts of that mean? And so I think we've always known that we were impactful in our region. I think we were able to bring that even to a higher level, taking advantage of really some of the problems that were developed by this, and the fact that maybe we couldn't all get together, but we could figure out ways to do that effectively. And I would just stress that moving forward, we've always here preached, innovation and excellence. And I think with a part of that, what our organizations can do, organizations like ours, is I think that we can be flexible where other folks can't. And we've used that flexibility and that innovation to allow us to be the folks, quite frankly, who our answer is yes. So when folks come to us with something, or there's an issue that needs to be dealt with in this region, people are coming to us because they know we'll deliver on a high level and that we're going to say yes and come up with solutions for them. A great example of that is just this week, we had the state, we were the first to come up with, in our state, with a good plan for reaching out with vaccines to homebound folks and engaging in that process. And so we were doing that, and the state wanted to do it statewide. And what they got from a lot of other partners was, this is going to be really hard, and I don't know if we can do this, and I don't know if we'll get back to you. And what I said is, we can set up an 800 number. We can have folks call here. We've got GIS. If you've got the folks to put shots in arms, it's a yes. We'll figure it out. And if you're there, it's amazing how many folks will come to you with things. And I'll just say, I think that's, for us, I hope will be, we'll have legs as we move out of this. I think now we are that go-to person for state agencies, for federal agencies, and for our localities. I think we'll continue to be a good resource.
Great. Thanks, Matthew. I love that attitude and that can-do approach. So great to hear that. Cheryl, what are your thoughts?
Well, the biggest challenge that WNDD faced, and we were a staff of 1 before we received the CARES funding. Now we're a staff of 3. But the biggest challenge was we had just completed our SEDS rewrite with a SEDS committee. And I mean, we were literally getting ready to submit it, and we got the funding for the ERR project. And so we had put together a SEDS engagement committee for the first time that would actually steward the SEDS projects and the goals. And we had to thread them into our ERR project. We didn't really have the bandwidth to now engage all of those activities, because now we were in the process of creating an economic recovery and resiliency planning document and programs that we could respond to the economic shock. So as soon as we got the funding and we were able to hire 2 economic recovery coordinators, which occurred in September, when we had submitted the SEDS project in June, we started taking all of the SEDS stewarding committee and began to engage them immediately in the process of putting that ERR plan. And so we're really looking forward now to actually begin to engage those activities that will interface and reflect the SEDS. We're doing an update now which is also the ERR plan. And I think the biggest lesson that we learned going through this process is the anything that was a need before was unveiled perhaps, but also underscored. So there were needs that were definitely unveiled as a result of the pandemic, but there were also, everything was underscored. Childcare, broadband, all the health and wellness issues, all the small businesses shutting down, the small businesses not having any kind of financial plans for if there was a shutdown. So we learned that there was a lot more gaps, underscored gaps, and that moving forward, we'll have to make sure that those gaps are addressed with resiliency plans for not only WNDD, but all the businesses and partners for the future. So that is going to be one of our biggest emphasis as we move forward. And we're working with all of our partners like the chambers, the RDA, regional development authorities to make sure that that happens.
Thanks, Shelley. There's been a few questions coming through about kind of your process and SEDS and the plan. So I'll make sure it's a link to those with the recording. And I'm sure there'll be some follow-up questions too for you. So thanks for that. Heather, kind of what are your reactions here?
Still that I need to learn from these other folks. Honestly, I think our biggest challenge is the biggest challenge that a small organization always faces. And it, kind of like this has, created a spotlight or a new focus on disparities in special populations and special concerns. It was more of a managing the EDO and managing the people, because we do kind of have a mindset of we're in the trenches together and we need to navigate the problem. That our little small office has had so many potential exposures that, there's certain programs that we operate by nature of protecting information that we don't do certain programs that information doesn't leave the office. It's protected with the server, because then if we do remote access, we have to look at Sarbanes-Oxley and all those other things that it becomes exceedingly expensive to operate if you do it too high tech, if you will. So we looked at it more as what's the human thing to do for managing our organization. That there's just been some realities of illness, whether or concern for illness or family, and we're like just handling it. And we're less than 10, so we're able to fly by the seat of our pants anyway a little bit, but more just adapt and support one another, because there has been virtually no work-life balance, because you're confronted with this every day, all day long. I literally had people that would email me or call me or text me at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. Hey, I need your help with. And they also know that I don't do morning, and they call anyway, and they email. I have one mayor, she likes to call me at 11:30 at night, but that's also like my favorite time to sit and drink a cup of coffee. So I'm not, it's more of a consultative, almost relationship oriented. But that in the same way, that's also really taught us just be human. Be your authentic self, be engaged. And, I'm just not even going to lie because I'm sounding really professional, but my favorite word starts with an F, and I've not been afraid to use it. I promised y'all I wouldn't use it today publicly, or I would try not to. But, it's been so almost rewarding and probably terrible reinforcement for my incorrigible self. To literally be so honest with folks, to just let it fly sometimes, because they're dealing with the same things. And that human element, whether it is managing the organization or managing the relationships or just managing the all, everybody's just trying to manage, everybody's just trying to deal. But also looking at it, so often we say, well, we have to be proactive rather than reactive. We need to lead solutions rather than chase problems. If there wasn't a problem, you wouldn't have to make a decision probably. You could take your time. But we still are trying to make sure that we take a breath and deal with it in a human way, in a realistic way, in a practical way.
Great. Thanks, Heather. And Angie.
Well, Brett, our biggest challenge was probably our biggest opportunity, and that was the CARES Act passing right at the same time that we were moving our entire staff into full-time telework and remote work. And we knew that we had to deliver for you guys and for our partners and the communities that we served. And, you know, we did it. And I think that's a huge testament to our staff. And I'm sure you guys all feel the same way about your teams. Heather, a lot of what you talked about is just resilience of your staff and your team and yourselves, and being graceful with each other. And so we're looking forward to gearing up again and sharing with you guys more about the rescue plan and how we look forward to continuing to help all of you with the important work you're doing in recovery.
Great. Thanks, Angie. So it looks like we've hit the hour here. I've got one more question. Are you able to all stay on for maybe 5 more minutes? If we do kind of a lightning round here, I want to wrap up on a kind of a positive note here, kind of inspirational note. I would really love to hear from each of you kind of what is motivating and inspiring you for this work right now. This past year has been challenging personally, professionally, emotionally on so many levels. And I'm always kind of curious with all the work that you've been doing, all the leadership roles you've been maintaining this year, kind of what's driving you to get out of bed in the morning and continue to do this work and support your communities and regions. So just share us maybe a minute each here, kind of what's giving you the drive these days. So Matthew, we'll start again with you.
Yeah, I'll tell you, so we just got staff fully back to the office, and we had a welcome back week last week, and it was just great to see all the smiling faces and everybody excited to be here. The staff really likes each other, and of course, it didn't hurt. We had the ice cream truck and a coffee truck and various events around the office. But what I told them is, we just delivered all of our usual services plus millions of dollars of new programming, working remotely, and did it on a high level as I think is possible. And if you can't celebrate that, you might as well just stay home. So that's what's driving us is, we like doing what we're about public service, and we've done it in a great way, and we've made it through this year. So everybody's smiling and ready to go.
Thanks. I know I would be motivated by an ice cream truck too, Matthew. So I love that. That's good. So Cheryl, how about you?
Well, what's motivating me was to get out of bed every morning was the enthusiasm, the investment, and the commitment from all of our ERR council reps and their team members. And they were very enthusiastic at the end of the day to circle back and help their communities. So again, getting back to the value of being a public servant, if you will, which I have been for a long time, it's about giving back to the community and helping them to thrive and survive, and maybe in reverse order, survive and thrive. And the enthusiasm of our partners is what makes me want to keep going and making it happen and get this plan engaged.
Great, thanks. And Heather?
We literally, when I talk to staff, since we've been able to add some part-timers, but it's new faces, I was like, listen, I know we're quasi-governmental, nonprofit, that kind of thing, and I'm having to compete for you, but I probably can't, but let me just appeal to you. We're going to change the world. And we believe it. And we don't necessarily have the ice cream trucks, but I definitely don't mind. We kind of, they all share cookbooks. I gave up cooking, but we literally look at it as this is our community, our families. This is ours to take care of. And resilience is just part of our competitiveness strategy. Capacity building is who we are and what we do. And, regionalism is collaboration. And whether it's our region, our state, and a couple of different regions, depending on who we're working with, we are going to change the world. We're going to create and infuse opportunity through this crisis. We just have to. That's all there is to it. And it's either relentless persistence or persistent relentlessness, or both. So that's where we are.
Beautiful. Thank you, Heather. And Angie, to wrap us up here.
Sure. Well, I mean, based on what everyone has said so far, we're really talking about not just bouncing back, but bouncing forward. And I heard that phrase early in the pandemic, and it really resonated with me because that's what you guys do as districts. Is you're not just status quo, you're really being innovative and looking forward and helping your communities bounce forward. And for us at EDA to be a part of that and to support you in that is really special and very motivating. So thanks for what you guys do.
That's great. Thank you, Angie. And listen, big thanks. Speaking of inspiration and motivation, having all of you today on this virtual panel, really inspiring for me, and I'm sure for the hundreds of folks that tuned in, your peers and colleagues and partners across the country. So from them to you, a big thanks for sharing your work on this hour. We could probably go on for days here reflecting on the work. And I apologize for folks that ask questions. I'll keep an eye on those, see if I can kind of shepherd any of those specific questions to the folks here on the panel to get a response. But really appreciate everyone sticking around a little bit longer here too. I think there's a tremendous need and desire for us to continue to connect and share and learn from each other. And as Angie and I were talking in the green room before we went live here, there'll be many more webinars to come as we have more funding opportunities coming down the line. And with that comes more best practices and examples and ways we can kind of learn and collaborate. So with that, just one quick note, as you close out today, there will be a short survey that'll pop up on the screen, give us a little bit of feedback on today's session, but also more importantly, what you're working on and what your needs are. As we continue at the NATO Research Foundation with our partners at EDA and of course the districts, how we can support and encourage and improve all the good work that you're doing across the country. So with that, until next time, we'll see you again. Take care of yourselves and each other, and thanks again for being here. So we'll see you on a future webinar, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.